Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Barry's tea, decaf. So I know some people are not a big fan of decaffeination, but I am not a huge decaf drinker. But some days I have had already too much caffeine, or I crave like a black tea, and I can't have it at that time. So decaffeinated means it's possible for me to enjoy the taste without the crazy flying in the air caffeination. I already had coffee this morning. It was one of my cheat days. And so this was it for me. And this particular box came from my office. It was my own tea that I bought. And I brought it home because I was able to go to my office yesterday. Yes, I was only there for a few hours, just something I needed to do in the middle of the day. So I didn't have to hit rush hour. Excuse me. I didn't have to do any of that dramatic stuff. The streets were not very crowded. But I was kind of, weirdly enough, I thought I was going to be really stressed about it, but I was kind of excited because, I kept thinking, what's it going to be like when we go back? And, right now we don't have to go back full time, but someday it might happen. So it's kind of nice to be prepared. It's like a little preview. So it's like you get it over with, you know what I mean? And I like that, Also, the weather was slightly better for going outdoors at all because it's been so hot in this area. Ugh. So that was good. So when I ever thought of going back to the office, the one thing I kept thinking of was not so much getting this tea home with me because, it's nice that I got to, but it really was the books that I had left behind. And before I left the office for the last time, I had a feeling that we were going to start to not be able to come back. So I did bring a lot of things home with me the last week. But there were just so many things I left behind. And because of my crazy book buying habit, there were a few books from BookOff that I had managed to leave behind. And so BookOff is a chain of bookshops that I think they originate from Japan, but they also have locations in Southern California, Hawaii, and this one in New York, which is a quick walk from my job. So I had been in the habit of at least once a week going to BookOff, and mainly because they sell a lot of different things. They sell Japanese books and manga, and they sell like action figures and CDs, DVDs, instruments, other technological things, because they buy things from people. So these are all like secondhand, I guess. I almost never go to that area to buy anything. I'm just not interested. I'm there for the books. But their English book section is up on the second floor, and they have rows and rows of $1 books that are usually in good condition, that are both nonfiction and fiction, and some, books that I don't care for, but there's quite a few that I like. And then they also have a section that's a non-fiction and fiction section. Separate non-fiction and fiction sections that are discounted but not super cheap. So sometimes they'll be a little bit discounted, and sometimes they'll be more discounted but not $1. So either way, I tend to go a little bit crazy, in BookOff and buy a bunch of things. So I often go at lunch, so I would buy some things and maybe not feel like carrying everything home with me. So I'd leave some behind, and, always thought it's kind of nice to have books at work in case I have some time to read and ran out of reading material somehow. It's good to have backup. But I was missing the books that I had left behind. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. And I kept thinking, when I go back to the office, I am bringing them home. That'll be my own haul. So I'm going to show you those books. However, on the way home with this slight haul, I was like, no, I am going to BookOff. I am going to the bookshop, and because I knew it was open. They had reopened recently, and not just for curbside, but for foot traffic. And I'm like, I know that it doesn't usually get super crowded anyway at the time that I was going, so I wouldn't be, with too many people, which I was right, and everybody wore masks, which was even better. So off I went. I was just like completely excited going back to a place that I just missed so much that I was having weird recurring dreams about going there. That and the Strand. Someday I'll go back to the Strand, but today's not the day. such a book nerd. But anyway, so I went there, and I mean, I will say that much as I am completely for wearing masks, I will say the heat generated from breathing on the mask is kind of makes it not as enjoyable for browsing as it used to be. But but for what it's worth, it's okay. You know, it just like it maybe it was good because I sped up a little bit in my browsing. Nevertheless, I bought a lot of books. So who can complain, right? I mean, when you see the amount of books that I brought home with me, you're going to be like, how? And then I will explain the miracles of Advil to you, because it was between that and all the stairs that I decided to use to take instead of escalators, because cardio, when I'm completely out of shape now. Anyway, so let's begin. First, I'll show you the books, the books that I brought home that I had bought in probably February, March. This is Wolf Hall, which I have read before. I finished the third in the trilogy, The Mirror and the Light, in I think April, and I just wanted to refer back to the book. Sometimes I reread books. I think half the books I read in July were rereads, approximately. And but I don't always need to reread. Sometimes I just want to re-browse a book, you know, a little skim. So I'm kind of glad that I could do that for $1. I usually try to only buy books that I've read already. Not always, but when I can get them as deeply discounted as possible. And so these are all the rereads I bought were all $1, so I don't feel so bad. Just like The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. I really love this book. It made me sad in some ways, but it was a man who one day goes out and walks up England. I think it was north. And does he go to Scotland? I think maybe. But just no plans, just went. Gets all kinds of blisters, so I know I thought about this when I was getting blisters from my silly footwear choice in Oxford. Must wear Oxfords in Oxford, but not necessarily well-fitting ones. And I got crazy blisters, my goodness, huge blisters. So I was thinking about this book when they were describing his blisters, but that's not all it's about, but I just been thinking about it. And then I left it behind at my job. This is a book I've read a lot of books by this author. She's one of the few history writers that got me into reading history, especially English history, big time. And that is Antonia Fraser, Faith and Treason, A Story of the Gunpowder Plot, which I've read about the Gunpowder Plot before, but not maybe a whole book about it. So that's not the writer, that's James. The 1st of England and 6th of Scotland in 1604. Yeah, why the long face? But here's the writer. Here she is. Anyway, so Gunpowder Plot took place around 1605, I think, and it was people who were going to blow up, I think, Parliament, and they got busted, and there were religious reasons, all kinds of things, and now I think every year in the UK they celebrate by letting off fireworks. I guess they call it Guy Fawkes Night. So I know a few things about it, but I could stand to learn more about it. And this is a book that I suddenly wanted to read, I think at the end of April or May. And I realized, after looking around my apartment for this book, I realized that I left it at the office. And I was like, oh man, because I'm in a Tudor mood. I want to read about Catherine Parr now. And this is a novel about Catherine Parr, but I don't have it. And I don't know if I'll be able to read it this month, though. Queen's Gambit by Elizabeth Fremantle. So Catherine Parr is one of my favorite of the Tudor queens, the wives of Henry VIII, because she, wrote a book that got published. That was very rare for royalty at all in those days, and she survived. She's the one who survived being queen. One of the two, actually, but the way she did was a story in itself. So I like it. Also, she's a Catherine. I like reading about Catherines. What can I say? I'm full of myself. So we're at the point where we're looking at the books that I actually bought yesterday at BookOff and schlepped home. The first 1, 2, 3 are basically rereads. This one I read a number of years ago, loved it, and it kind of corresponded with my Victorian Pre-Raphaelite obsession, and that is A.S. Byatt's Possession. And the cover art, The Beguiling of Medusa by... No, Medusa. See, I'm wearing my contacts, I can't see very well. The Beguiling of Merlin by Sir Edward Burne-Jones, who is one of my favorite of the painters of that time. And I remember loving this book. They had like made up poets and stuff, but it was so brilliant, the story, that even though I forgot most of it, I want to look at it over again. I never saw the film version of it. Not because I'm that much of a snob, I just really don't want to see it. Anyway, and this I've read before. I wanted to get the Barnes & Noble version of it. I've seen it when it goes on sale for about $5. I think it might have also been pink, so I already have a pink. This is one of my very favorite books also, by the way, Wives and Daughters. But anyway, so I got this in Everyman version. It was only $1, so he's like, yeah, look, why not buy me? Come on, only $1. Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. So there you go. It's chunky, but it's not the chunkiest book I have here. Excuse me. I can't breathe because I am so overwhelmed by the amount of books I got. This book I say I read, but I wouldn't say I read. I have different versions of it and have consulted it many times and read parts of it many times, but I don't think I've ever done a cover to cover read. I might do it anyway. The Daniel, my goodness. The Diary of Samuel Pepys by Samuel Pepys. And, well, it's edited with a preface by Richard Le Gallienne, an introduction by Robert Louis Stevenson. So this could be good. I will like that. One of my favorite Samuel Johnson's kind of interesting. He lived around the time of the Restoration. He was in the company of some very well-known people at the time, including the King of England. And he lived in London and kept a diary. I'm sure other people did. There were a few other people that have, writings that are preserved from then, but he's probably the most famous one. And there's just not as many people keeping great records of their lives, their daily lives. I mean, some people had more daily lives in other parts of the world that had nothing to do with, being so close to history, but he manages to do the day-to-day feeling of life, but also part of history, because, I mean, he was in London during the Great Fire of 1666. I don't think his place got destroyed, but he did have to scramble to save his things just in case. And previously, the plague of 65, not to mention, the Restoration, all the things that happened around that time. There was lots of action. And he wrote during the time, and he talked about the times of history, but he also talked about things that happened at home. What more can you ask for? This is a book that I started, probably took it out from the library at someone's recommendation from work, and then I just probably had too many books to read, returned it to the library. I saw this for $1. I knew I read a book by this writer called People of the Book and liked it, so I thought, let's try this one. It's called Caleb's Crossing by Geraldine Brooks, and it is a historical fiction about, I think it's the first Native American person who went to Harvard, I think, and that's pretty amazing. And it mentions Martha's Vineyard, which is a place I still want to go to. I've barely been to Massachusetts. I spent a few days in Boston, barely, and I have kind of a fantasy of going to Martha's Vineyard one day because it just sounds so relaxing, and you could walk around a lot there, which I love. And also Cape Cod, just because a lot of writers and illustrators that I know lived in Cape Cod, and they all sounded very interesting as people. I don't know. So, anyway, so that's a book. This is a book by a writer that I've been planning to read her books. I think she died quite recently, and I see adaptations of a lot of her things on streaming, like BritBox, Acorn, that kind of thing. I think Hamish Macbeth, Agatha Raisin. But this is not one of them. This is the first of, I guess, a series called the Poor Relations series, Lady Fortescue Steps Out by M.C. Beaton. I think it's about someone who starts a kind of hotel with a posh feeling. I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but it's not a long book. And I was on the phone with my friend when I got home yesterday after schlepping all these books home. You haven't even seen the rest of these books. And I mentioned what it was, and she said to me, that sounds very Alexander McCall Smith. And I'm like, yeah, even though this takes place, I think, in Regency times. But I was like, yeah, it kind of does. And the cover art looks quite like an Alexander McCall Smith cover art. So that could be nice. That could be a fun little read. You know, I hope so. I hope it doesn't look cute and fun and it ends up being horribly depressing. You know? But anyway. So this is a book. This is a book that I've seen at BookOff so many times. And I thought, maybe it's there because it's not that good or whatever. I forgot about the possibility that some books are just so popular or sold so well that people now have copies and not everybody keeps their books. You know, side point, I do want to get rid of some more books and do an unhaul. And one of the places I passed by back in May was a place in Sunnyside, which is like a neighborhood over from where I live. And on a good day, it's a nice walk. And they had like a book exchange where you could, I think, bring books. And I don't know if you can buy books or pick up books. I don't know the situation, but either way, it sounds like a great place to bring some books. So if I am in the mood one day to schlep a few books a bit of a distance, I might do that. So I'm not completely against getting rid of books. Anyway, so, or giving away. But I saw this mentioned a couple of times on BookTube as people want to read this, whatever. And it's a memoir. I love memoirs. So this is The Hare with Amber Eyes by Edmund de Waal, A Hidden Inheritance. It's about a ceramicist who gets a hold of, some netsuki, which is some Japanese wood and ivory carvings. And then he looks into the history of that and his family, etc. And it's a whole story. And I was like, that could be cool. So, look at all these people. Where do they all come from? Okay. You don't want to hear karaoke night from me. So, yeah. And that was a dollar, I think, is what most of these, not all, but I would say almost all of them are $1, but some of them are not. The biggest chunksters were not, but that makes sense. This book is a weird book I picked up on a whim. Haven't even opened the wrapping yet. So no, if any of you read scholarly books by the University Press of Virginia, any of you into Shakespeare and know anything about this writer, let me know. This is Hamlet as Minister and Scourge and Other Studies in Shakespeare and Milton by Fredson Bowers. It just seems like something to get into if I'm in one of my academic modes. And September is, I think, every year they do a thing called Shakespeare on BookTube. ShakeTube on BookTube. ShakeTube. So there's a bit of a group reading of Shakespeare, which I would like to participate in this year. I do like Shakespeare, but it's kind of nice to read along with other people. So I would like to also read more about Shakespeare's writings, etc. So who knows? It could be good or it could be disappointing. Who knows? So I always say when I buy books, who knows? Except for the rereads, because I know. Anyway, so this next book is a book about somebody who I've read about before, but I don't think I read this particular book. And it's the time period that I've been very immersed in July, which was Jane Austen's time around the Regency period. But even like the previous to that and right after that whole time period, it was a time of change. I mean, not everything changed over, but some systems were moving around, and women were finding not like dramatic freedoms, but starting to write more. And that had been before at all possible. And I love the Romantic poets, and I love that some of them gathered together among other people and kind of challenged each other to write something, and the one person who wrote something that became the most successful and famous was a woman, and that is Mary Shelley. So this is In Search of Mary Shelley by Fiona Sampson. The girl who wrote Frankenstein. That's Mary Shelley, not Sampson. So this could be good. We shall see. It was, I hope so. And if not, what are you going to do? So again, I take risks sometimes when I go to BookOff, but I've been trying, like I said, obviously not, I would try not to buy as many books, but I do anyway, but I've been trying to not take risks and spend too much money on books that I don't know a lot about. But I'm like at the point now where I was just so desperate. When I say desperate, that sounds dramatic, but I had been so missing going to a bookshop at all. Like, I passed by Barnes and Noble, but I had just gotten something, which I'll probably show you in a future haul, from Barnes and Noble online, and I just figured I can go back there maybe another time. I love browsing Barnes and Noble, but BookOff just won out. But either way, if my only option had been Barnes and Noble, I would have enjoyed that. It's just, I think I so badly missed the feeling of looking at books in a location that I went to town, literally. Yes, and this means, so when I just referred to that book I just got, that this haul is not going to be probably the last haul. I don't know. So many books that I have purchased since, I think, May that I haven't shown you guys. Anyway, so this is a subject that I always feel like, oh, I don't want to get into it, because then once I get into it, it's going to be yet another obsession of mine. But maybe not, because I read a couple of biographies on Catherine the Great and loved it. I found it interesting, but not to the point that I want to read everything about her and that time. But I saw this book, and I really hope it's good, because I only spent $7.50, but it, like I said, it wasn't a $1 one, so it's slightly more of a risk. But it looks so pretty. So this is The Romanovs by, oh my goodness, I'm hurting my wrist just picking this up. Simon Sebag Montefiore, author of Jerusalem. So 1613 to 1918. We know what happened in 1918. Do you know what happened in 1918? Yeah, the Romanovs were destroyed. It was sad. But anyway, yeah, I just, I want to read it. but I just realized what someone wrote in the back, in a blurb. It was by Anthony Beevor, Financial Times. Simon Sebag Montefiore's The Romanovs is epic history on the grandest scale. Game of Thrones seems like the proverbial vicar's tea party in comparison. Excellent. So, wow. Anyway, I hope this is good. I don't know. Those of you who have read books on Russian history, if you've read this, let me know what you think. If I should prioritize this. But it's so pretty. I know it's the weirdest thing to say, but Okay. So this is last, but definitely not least. This is a book that I have seen over time. You guys have seen me refer to Hamilton by Ron Chernow, and I thoroughly enjoyed that book. So I've wanted to get a hold of this. There goes my wrist. Ta-da! Grant by Ron Chernow. So this is about Ulysses S. Grant. I actually not last May, obviously, but the year before, I saw his tomb, Grant's tomb, we'll refer to that, in Upper Manhattan, before I went to a bookshop and bought a bunch of books. So this is would be the second book by Ron Chernow about someone whose tomb whose burial space I have been to, because Hamilton's I've been to many times, way before the play came out. Anyway, so I really hope I like this book, because it is huge, but who knows when I'll actually read it. I bought 2 books about Churchill. You can see one back of me. Turning my back on you, sorry. This one. And it is a doorstopper, and I have another one that's a doorstopper. I mean, I have so many chunky books. But I just love biographies. I love history, so whatever. So that was my massive haul. Yes, somehow I made it home with all these books. Don't at me with the whole you could have saved the trouble digitally, because, whatever. And if you guys have read these books, let me know what you think without giving away spoilers, obviously, so I can prioritize which ones to pick up first. And if you like talking about these kinds of books, and if you like hauls, please subscribe. And if you've been to BookOff, I know some of you have been, but yeah, let me know what your experience has been with BookOff. Sometimes it's not as positive. But anyway, so this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day.